After my husband died, his lawyer handed me a sealed envelope and said my husband wanted me to open it alone. Inside was a single key and a note with an address I had never heard before. It said, "Go to 145 Maple Street, alone." I had no idea what I would find there, but I went. What I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Before I tell you what happened, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. My name is Eleanor Briggs, and I live in a quiet New Hampshire town where everyone knows each other by name. The home I live in now is the same one I shared with my husband, Nathan, for more than 35 years. Every room in this house holds a memory of him. His reading chair still sits by the window, the cushions slightly flattened from years of use. His coffee mug is still in the cabinet, the one with the chipped handle he refused to throw away. Even the smell of pine wood seems to linger from the workbench he kept in the garage. Losing him left a hole in my life that nothing has been able to fill. Nathan was a gentle man with a calm way of speaking. He was the kind of person who listened before he talked. He had a steady presence that made me feel safe, even during our hardest years. When he passed away from a sudden heart condition, my world shifted. I went from being a wife to being a widow overnight. And that kind of change hits deeper than you expect. Grief moves into your home without asking and touches everything you do. Our daughter, Harper, checks in on me often. She is 35 and full of energy, always trying to pull me out of the heaviness that has settled in the house. She brings groceries, fusses over whether I am eating enough, and sits with me on the porch when I need company. She says, "Mom, Dad would want you to rest." And she means well, but she does not understand the silence that comes after decades of partnership. Our son Owen worries too, but in a different way. He watches me with quiet eyes, always calculating whether I am okay or just pretending to be. He asks simple questions like, "How did you sleep?" or "Do you need anything?" But his voice carries the weight of concern. Both of my children love me deeply, and I know that. But grief is something even love cannot hurry. For a while, I spent my days sorting through Nathan's belongings. Some things I could donate, but others held too much meaning. Letters he wrote me in our early years, the sweater he wore every winter, photos of our vacations. I thought I had seen every piece of his life, every secret he ever held, because our marriage was built on honesty and trust. At least, that is what I believed. Everything changed when I received a call from Samuel Weller, Nathan's lawyer and longtime friend. Samuel asked me to come to his office because Nathan left something for me. I assumed it was a letter or a final message of comfort. When Samuel handed me the sealed envelope, he placed his hand on mine and said, "He asked me to give this to you and you alone." His tone made me uneasy. The envelope felt too light to carry anything important, but inside I found the key and the note with the address. I stared at the writing, confused. I had never heard Nathan mention anything about Maple Street, not once in all our years together. Why would he leave me a key to a place I had never seen? Why did he ask me to go alone? A feeling of fear mixed with curiosity settled in my chest. I folded the note carefully and kept the key in my hand long after I left Samuel's office. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the key while the house sat in complete silence. I wanted to call Harper or Owen, but something kept me from doing it. Nathan's request felt personal, almost sacred. I felt torn between fear and loyalty, but I knew I had to follow his instructions. Even from beyond the grave, my husband was asking me to trust him, and I did. I decided I would go to 145 Maple Street the very next morning, even though I had no idea what waited for me behind that door. The next morning, I woke up long before sunrise, unable to calm the uneasiness sitting in my chest. The key to 145 Maple Street rested on my nightstand, catching bits of light from the lamp as if it had something to say. I picked it up and ran my thumb across the metal, wondering how many years Nathan had held on to this secret. The fact that he waited until after his death to reveal it told me it was not something small. It was something he believed would change the way I saw him, something he feared I might misunderstand while he was alive. That thought alone made my stomach tighten. I made a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Nathan and I had eaten breakfast together for decades. His chair was empty, and the quiet felt heavier than usual. I unfolded the note again and stared at the address. Maple Street was across town, not far, but far enough that it felt like another world. I had lived in this community for most of my life, yet I had never heard Nathan mention anything about that street, not during casual conversations, not during our many drives, not even in stories about his early years. That silence made me even more nervous. Harper called just as I finished my coffee, her voice cheerful as she asked if she could stop by later. I almost told her everything right then, but the memory of Nathan's handwriting stopped me. Alone, I forced myself to stay calm and said, "I have some things to take care of today, but I will see you soon." She paused, sensing something was off. "Mom, are you sure?" I lied and said I was fine. The guilt hit me as soon as I hung up. I had never kept secrets from my children, but this felt like a moment meant only for me. By the time I grabbed my coat and keys, my heart was pounding. The drive was short, but every turn felt like I was heading deeper into a story I did not know I was part of. As I turned onto Maple Street, the houses grew older and quieter. Most had large porches and fading paint, the kind you find in neighborhoods filled with history. My eyes scanned the numbers until I reached it. 145 Maple Street. The house looked lived in, but lonely, as if someone had taken care of the outside only enough to keep it standing. The paint was chipped, the shutters slightly crooked, and the porch steps worn down from age. A single wind chime hung by the door, tapping lightly against the breeze. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. A wave of fear washed over me. Not fear of danger, but fear of the unknown. I wondered if Nathan had lived here once, long before I met him. I wondered if the house belonged to someone he knew, someone he never spoke about. I wondered if I was about to find something that would break my heart, or something that would make me love him even more. The not knowing was the hardest part. Finally, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the porch. Each step felt heavier than the last. The neighborhood was quiet except for a dog barking in the distance. When I reached the front door, I felt the rough wood beneath my hand as I steadied myself. The key in my pocket felt warm against my palm when I pulled it out. I hesitated before sliding it into the lock, wondering once again why he wanted me to come alone. The key fit perfectly, turning with a smooth click, as if it had been waiting for this moment for years. My breath caught in my throat. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking from disuse. The inside of the house surprised me. It was not abandoned or dirty. It was clean and organized, like someone still cared for it, even if they did not live there. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. A coat rack stood by the door with a single jacket hanging on it. I stepped inside, calling out a quiet, "Hello," even though I knew no one would answer. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I walked deeper into the living room, and that was when the first shocking detail appeared. On a small side table rested a framed photograph of Nathan, a younger version of him, smiling in a way I had never seen before. Beside him was a woman I did not recognize. My breath froze. Then I noticed other photos on the wall, several showing Nathan with a child, a boy who looked to be around 2 or 3. My hand trembled as I reached for one of the frames. The boy had Nathan's eyes. The connection was unmistakable. Confusion, fear, and heartbreak surged all at once. This was the part of Nathan's life he had never shared. This was the reason he asked me to come alone. I stood there, surrounded by memories that did not belong to me, memories he had locked away for years. And I understood that everything I believed about our life was about to change. I stood frozen in the living room, holding the photograph of Nathan with the little boy who had his same eyes and soft smile. My mind raced with questions that twisted my stomach into tight knots. Why had he never told me about this child? Why had he kept this house? Why had he waited until after his death to send me here? The weight of the silence in the room pressed down on me, and I felt myself sway slightly, needing to sit before my legs gave out. I placed the photograph back on the table and moved to the worn couch positioned near the window. The cushion dipped beneath me, carrying the faint scent of old fabric and time. For a moment, I let my hands rest on my knees, trying to steady my breathing. My heart felt torn between disbelief and the desperate need to understand. I whispered out loud, "Nathan, what did you want me to see?" My voice cracked, but hearing my own words grounded me enough to stand again. I walked toward a small wooden desk pushed against the far wall. It looked recently dusted, which confused me even more. Someone had been in this house not long ago. Someone had cared for it. Inside the top drawer, I found a stack of letters tied neatly with a blue ribbon. My fingers shook as I untied them and unfolded the first one. The handwriting was unmistakably Nathan's. The letter was dated long before we met. In it, he wrote to the boy, whose name I now saw written clearly, Miles. He wrote about working extra shifts to support him, about how he dreamed of giving him a better life, and about how proud he was of every little thing Miles did, from learning to walk to drawing pictures of airplanes. I felt something tighten deep inside my chest as I read. Every sentence revealed a part of Nathan I had never been allowed to see. He had not been hiding a scandal. He had been hiding a heartbreak. I wiped my eyes and kept reading, letter after letter, watching Nathan's life unfold in a way I never imagined. He wrote about struggles with the boy's mother, who battled an illness that made it hard for her to care for him alone. He wrote about paying medical bills and working long nights as a young man, trying to be everything the child needed. I realized then that Nathan had lived an entire chapter of life marked by responsibility, fear, and love long before he ever met me, and he had carried that history like a shadow. I put the letters down and opened the desk's bottom drawer. Inside were medical records. I skimmed through them and felt a sharp pain in my heart. Miles had passed away in his early 20s due to a rare genetic condition. That explained the quiet sadness I had seen in Nathan sometimes, the moments where he seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing. At the time, I assumed it was stress or exhaustion. Now I understood it had been grief. Raw, heavy grief he never wanted to burden me with. As I stood there holding the final document, a small envelope slipped out and fell to the floor. I bent down and picked it up. On the front was my name, written gently in Nathan's handwriting. My breath caught. I sat down again before opening it, feeling a rush of emotion swell in my chest. Inside was a letter addressed to me. Nathan wrote that he had kept this house as a memorial to his son. He wrote that he had tried many times to tell me the truth, but could not bring himself to reopen the wound while we were building our life together. He wrote that he was afraid his past would cause me unnecessary pain, and he wanted our marriage to be built on peace instead of sorrow. He ended by explaining that he left the key for me so that I would finally know the full story after he was gone, when the truth could no longer create distance between us. Tears filled my eyes as I pressed the letter to my chest. I understood now. Nathan had not kept this from me out of betrayal. He had kept it out of protection, out of love. The answer was no longer in the hidden life he once lived, but in the choice he made to share it with me when he felt I was ready. I folded the letter carefully and stood again, a soft strength replacing the earlier panic. The turning point was no longer about the secrets he kept. It was about the truth he trusted me to carry now. I knew I had to finish exploring the house. I needed to learn every part of the story he left behind. I held Nathan's letter tight in my hands as I rose from the couch, feeling a mix of heartbreak and understanding settle deeper into my chest. The house suddenly felt alive with the memories he had tucked away, and I knew I could not leave without seeing everything he left behind. I walked down a short hallway and opened the first door on the right. The room inside looked like a young man's bedroom frozen in time. A neatly made bed with a faded blue quilt sat by the window. A desk in the corner held a small stack of books, mostly science and mechanics, suggesting Miles had been curious and bright. A pair of old sneakers sat near the closet door as if someone had kicked them off without thinking. The sight of such ordinary objects hit me harder than anything else. These were the things Nathan had kept safe, the things he could not bear to part with, because they were the last pieces of his son. I stepped farther into the room and noticed drawings pinned to a corkboard. One showed a simple stick figure family. A man, a woman, and a child holding hands. The woman in the picture did not look like me. She was the boy's mother, someone I had never met, but suddenly felt connected to through shared loss. I looked at the child's handwriting under one of the pictures. My dad is the strongest man in the world. My throat tightened, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. How many times had Nathan walked past these same drawings, remembering the weight of that small hand in his? How many times had he stood in this room alone, wishing he could bring his son back? The grief belonged to him first, but now I was stepping into it, piece by painful piece. I turned and opened the closet. A small box sat on the top shelf. I brought it down carefully and carried it to the bed. Inside were mementos, birthday cards, a photo of Miles as a teenager, smiling shyly with braces, and a silver watch with initials engraved on the back. To MB Love, Dad. The watch was well worn. The leather strap softened from use. I imagined Nathan buying it, proud to give his son something meaningful. I imagined Miles wearing it, unaware he would never grow old enough to pass it on. With a deep breath, I placed everything back in the box and returned it to its place. I walked to the last door at the end of the hall. Something inside me told me this room would hold the answers Nathan wanted me to see. When I pushed the door open, I found what looked like a small study. A desk stood beneath a window, and on top of it was a thin binder with my name written on a sticky note. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents Nathan had written over the past few years, a timeline of his past, explanations of decisions he had made, and reflections on moments he wished had gone differently. The depth of transparency in those pages felt like an act of love, written with careful honesty. He explained how young he had been when Miles was born, and how terrified he felt as he tried to support both the child and the mother. He explained how losing them both in different ways shaped him. He explained how he carried the weight of guilt because he believed if he had done things differently, maybe his son would still be alive. And then, at the bottom of one page, he wrote something that made me sit down and cover my mouth with my hand. Loving you saved me. I kept my brokenness hidden, because I did not want to bring pain into our life together. I wanted you to know the man I became, not the man I used to be. But you deserve the whole truth, and now it is yours to hold with the same strength you gave me for 35 years. Reading those words tore something open inside me, but instead of feeling betrayed, I felt honored. Nathan trusted me enough to hold the most fragile corner of his past. He believed I could carry the truth without turning away from him. I sat there for a long time, letting the reality sink in. This house was not a place of betrayal. It was a sanctuary built out of grief and memories. It was where Nathan stored the part of his heart that never healed. And now he had given it to me. When I finally stood, I walked to the small window and looked out at the quiet street. The sun had shifted, casting a soft glow across the room. For the first time since I arrived, I felt a sense of peace. Nathan was gone, but he had left everything I needed to understand him fully. He had opened a door he could never bring himself to open while alive, and the truth did not destroy us. It connected us in a way I never expected. As I stepped out of the house and locked the door behind me, I knew I was walking into the final chapter of our story, one built not only on love, but on truth, finally revealed. When I stepped outside and locked the door behind me, the cold air hit my face like a reminder that the world had kept moving, even while I had been walking through the deepest corners of my husband's past. I held the key tightly in my hand as I walked down the porch steps, feeling a strange mix of sadness and gratitude settle in my chest. The house was no longer a mystery. It was a monument to a chapter of Nathan's life filled with pain, pride, and love he never knew how to share. As I sat in my car, I realized I could not carry this alone anymore. The truth was mine now, but it belonged to my children too. They deserved to know the full story of the father they loved. I drove home slowly, the letter on the seat beside me, and when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Harper's car already there. She must have sensed something was wrong earlier, because she got out as soon as she saw me, her face tight with worry. "Mom, where have you been? I've been calling." I took a deep breath and said, "I need to talk to you and your brother, both of you." Her expression shifted from concern to curiosity, but she nodded without asking questions. Within an hour, Owen arrived, still in his work clothes, and we all sat together in the living room, the same room where Nathan used to read the newspaper every morning. I held the letter on my lap, unsure where to begin. When I finally spoke, my voice felt steady. "Your father left something for me, and it is something we all need to understand." They listened quietly as I explained the key, the address, and the house filled with memories none of us had known existed. As I spoke, Harper pressed her hand to her mouth, and Owen leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on the floor. When I told them about Miles, there was a long silence that felt heavy but necessary. Harper finally whispered, "Why didn't he tell us?" Her voice cracked in confusion rather than anger. Owen shook his head slowly. Dad wasn't the type to hide things unless he really believed he was protecting someone. I handed them the letter, letting them read Nathan's words for themselves. Watching their faces shift from shock to empathy reminded me how much love lived in this family, even through loss. When they finished reading, Harper leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "Mom, this doesn't change anything about our father. It just makes me feel sad for what he went through alone." Owen nodded, "And grateful he found peace with you." Their acceptance filled me with a warmth I had not felt since before Nathan passed. Instead of anger or confusion, they responded with compassion. We spent the next hour talking about what it must have been like for Nathan, a young man carrying responsibilities he was not ready for, then losing a son he loved. We talked about the woman in the photos, a mother who had struggled, and a young man whose life had ended far too soon. It was a painful story, but it belonged to us now. In the days that followed, Harper and Owen visited the house with me. Walking through those rooms together made the weight easier to carry. They touched the drawings on the walls, looked through the letters, and asked gentle questions that helped us piece together Nathan's early life. We cleaned the rooms carefully, not to erase anything, but to honor the memories preserved there. Harper placed fresh flowers on the desk where I had found Nathan's final letter, and Owen repaired a loose step on the porch, saying, "Dad would want this place cared for." We decided to keep the house, not as a secret, not as a burden, but as a quiet space that honored the boy Nathan had loved and lost. With each visit, the sadness softened into something more peaceful. I realized that even though Nathan could not tell me the truth while alive, he trusted our love enough to reveal it when the time was right. And in knowing the full story, I felt closer to him than I had in years. One evening, as I stood alone in the living room of the Maple Street house, the sun poured through the window and lit the drawings on the wall. In that soft gold light, I felt Nathan's presence in the quiet, not in grief, but in understanding. He had carried pain, but he had also carried love, and now I finally carried the truth with him. When I locked the door and walked back to my car, I felt lighter, as if I had placed something heavy back where it belonged. This was not the ending I expected, but it was the one that made our story whole. If you found this story meaningful, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you are watching from.